1983, Judy Johnson, the mother of a young boy who attended McMartin Preschool, reported to the police that one of the teachers at the school had sodomized her son. She also accused the McMartin family, which owned the school, of practicing satanic rituals, where they abused children under their care for ritual purposes. This accusation soon ballooned into a national scandal, as several parents began making the same incredible accusations. They said that the McMartin family was a satanic cult, and that they used the children under their care for satanic ritual abuse. But the scandal was just beginning. The McMartin case was just one of the many scandals caused by the Satanic Panic of the 1980s and 1990s. In this video, we'll be taking a look at this satanic panic and we'll be revealing the truth that you need to know. Was there a slew of satanic ritual abuse committed on children, or was it all just a moral panic with no basis? We'll be exploring all the evidence currently in the public domain to find out the truth behind this panic. The Satanic Panic of the 1980s and 1990s started with one book. Interestingly, the book was written by Canadians, but its effect was mostly felt in America. The book in question was Michelle Remembers. It was written by Canadian psychiatrist Lawrence Pasder and his patient and future wife, Michelle Smith. The book was centered around Michelle remembering satanic ritual abuse that involved her. However, the claims she made were not from her regular memory, but were induced through recovery memory therapy. This therapy tried to get adults to remember tragic memories they might have suppressed. Pasder used this technique on Michelle, and she used it to remember horrific instances of satanic ritual abuses that she believed were real. The book soon became really popular, and people started making claims of their own that mirrored what they'd read in the book. Some of these claims included testimony about a global elite that abducted children or bred them for human sacrifice, satanic sexual abuse, prostitution, and pornography. The allegations spread like wildfire. It soon became a moral panic that affected lawyers, therapists, social workers, and everyone who worked with children. There were several conferences on the matter presented to civil society and professional groups, such as the police and therapists. These conferences always had the most extraordinary and perhaps even exaggerated allegations. Despite that, people listened, and even professionals started making allegations of their own. They all saw satanic ritual abuses everywhere, and almost everyone of any standing was accused of dabbling in it. There were religious conferences, talk shows, radio shows, and even television shows based around these abuses. It seemed like everyone knew someone who was into satanic rituals. At the height of the panic, it was near impossible for the police to even investigate the crimes themselves. That's because everyone accused was already considered guilty, and merely trying to investigate without apportioning blame was met with suspicion. Skeptical people also had a chance of being accused, so most people, even the skeptical, just shut up their mouths and let the panic run wild. The abuses were made even more popular by the McMartin trial, which took over 7 years to get its conclusion. The trial was based on an allegation that came to characterize the satanic panic of the time. Members of the McMartin family were accused of conducting these rituals in 1983 by several parents who had children at the daycare. By 1984, the accusations had become strong enough for the police to open an investigation into the matter. To begin their investigation, the police invited an abuser therapy clinic to interview the children who were at the daycare. The therapy clinic used highly suggestive techniques to interview the children, and these techniques invited them to pretend or lie about some events. By the end of these investigations, the clinic claimed that 360 children had been abused by the McMartins. This finding further inflamed the satanic panic that was already engulfing the country. The finding also increased the spate of satanic ritual abuse allegations and their complexity. However, a lot of the claims that were made were just straight up bizarre. Some of the kids alleged that they had seen witches fly, had traveled in hot air balloons, and had gone through underground tunnels. One of the kids even alleged that Chuck Norris was one of the abusers. Despite the bizarre nature of some of the claims, the case eventually went to court. Out of all 350 students who claimed that they had been abused, only a few were willing to testify in court about their abuse. During the case, the authors of Michelle Remembers, which was the catalyst for the claims of satanic ritual abuse, met with the children and spoke to them. After more than a year of deliberation, the case was dropped by the district attorney's office on the basis that the evidence against the McMartins was very weak, and it is difficult not to agree with that summation. Let's take a look at some of the claims made by the children and see just how weak the evidence was. First, some of them claimed that they had been abused in underground tunnels beneath the daycare. However, several excavations on the site turned up nothing. The daycare had no secret tunnels whatsoever. Another child claimed that they had their naked pictures taken through a game called Naked Movie Star, but even that didn't hold up to any scrutiny. During the trial, other children said that the Naked Movie Star was a rhyming taunt used to tease other children and had nothing to do with naked pictures. Importantly, Judy Johnson, the mother who made the first allegations, also made bizarre claims about Ray Buckey, the son of Peggy McMartin, the owner of the daycare. She said that he could fly and had special powers that he got through using children for satanic ritual sacrifice. However, Johnson also admitted that she had a history of mental illness, which kind of explains a lot of her behavior. During the trial, a man named George Freeman testified that Ray Buckey had confessed to him about abusing the children while they shared a cell. That testimony was the cornerstone of the case, but it was eventually revealed that Freeman had perjured himself in exchange for favorable treatment by the prosecution. He eventually attempted to flee the country after his case of perjury was discovered. In the end, after 3 long years of deliberation, the McMartins were acquitted of most of the charges and were released on bail after 5 years in prison. By that time, the Satanic Panic was in full gear and had resulted in heightened sensitivity to child abuse all across the nation. The McMartin case lasted almost 7 years, cost $15 million taxpayers' money, and became the longest and most expensive criminal trial case in US history. It also ultimately resulted in no convictions. The school was closed down and the building was dismantled. 15 years later, one of the children came out to recant their testimony. They claimed that they said a lot of things that didn't happen, and that they had only gone along because they wanted to please their parents. Despite the failure of the government to convict the McMartins and prove that satanic ritual abuse is a real thing, many people still believe in them. Some use the Satanic Panic as some sort of proof that a cabal of Satanists run the world. While this claim might sound ludicrous to many people, we aren't just going to dismiss them because of how they sound. After all, truth can be stranger than fiction, and some of the most ridiculous conspiracies have ended up being correct. So let's dig into it, shall we? The entire panic was ignited by the book Michelle Remembers, and the events in that book were narrated by Michelle Smith. But the problem is that those events didn't happen to Michelle. She says she remembers them, but further research has shown that those memories were induced by her doctor, Lawrence Pazder, during the now discredited techniques of hypnosis. The reason Pazder used these techniques is because there was a belief that victims of sexual abuse often repress their memories, and those memories can only be accessed through hypnosis and other such dubious psychological tricks. However, we now know that's a lie. There is no scientific evidence that sexual abuse or trauma of any kind causes such a severe repression of memories that the victim cannot remember until they are hypnotized. This doesn't mean that people don't repress their memories. It means that even if they did, there's no proof that hypnosis and leading questions are the way to reveal those memories. We know today that people under hypnosis have an unusual ability to create confabulations. What this means is that they produce stories that they think are their memories, but are mere figments of their imaginations. Most psychologists today agree that hypnosis doesn't help patients unveil repressed memories, and a series of medical malpractice lawsuits in the 80s permanently put an end to it. But before that was done, Michelle had already written Michelle Remembers, and it already wreaked havoc across the United States. This happened even though the book was basically filled with a series of absurd confabulations. Anyway, the most important piece of evidence that destroys the foundation of the Satanic Panic is, well, no evidence. After 2 decades of investigation and millions of dollars in research, not one shred of forensic or corroborating evidence has turned up to validate the panic. Right now, it seems that it was just much ado about nothing. But if there was no evidence, why did anyone ever take it seriously? To be fair to the academic community, not everyone fell for the satanic ritual abuse panic. In fact, the first anthropologists and psychologists who investigated the matter failed to find any evidence of any sexual abuse occurring. Instead, they said that the allegations were merely a result of rumors and folk legends that were spread by media hype, Christian fundamentalism, mental health, and law enforcement professionals and child abuse advocates. And why would these groups try to spread this panic? What do they gain from convincing people that there's a cabal of face-eating ritualists who are hell-bent on abusing children? Well, for evangelical groups who have religious and political goals, it was only logical to spread the panic even further. For one, it painted them in a good light and positioned them as fighters for the rights of children. It also gave them enough ammunition to attack the public school system and the secular government. Lastly, gave them grounds to stand on when calling for faith-based educational policies. However, that's not the only explanation for the spread of the moral panic. Other explanations include a general backlash against working mothers who put their kids in daycare, backlash against gay workers in children's daycares, and some even say it was an attempt by radical feminists to undermine the nuclear family. Whatever the cause was, the panic spread pretty quickly and consumed the nation. In the end, the panic died out after even its strongest believers began to see that no evidence for their fear was turning up. These days, the Satanic Panic of the 80s lives on in conspiracy theories about a global new world order and a cabal of blood-drinking reptilians running the world. But just like the Satanic Panic of the 80s and 90s, these theories also have no shred of evidence supporting them. And that's the whole truth and nothing but the truth concerning the Satanic Panic of the 80s and 90s. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash the like and subscribe buttons. Goodbye.